I'm gonna be honest with you. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Let me explain. Reason number 1, a confusing paradox. A man named Jeff finishes up his meal around sundown and lets out a relieved sigh. The food that took up his plate wasn't the most balanced. Although he had some peas and carrots to get some whole vegetables in for the day, the majority of the plate's space was taken up by potato chips and a hamburger. As he gulped down his last sip of Coca-Cola, he didn't necessarily feel all that bad, but he didn't feel good either. Realizing he didn't have that much time left in the day to complete his work, he turned off the YouTube video he was watching and went to put his full focus on his computer monitor. Jeff worked your typical office job as an accountant manager for a big tech company. The salary was pretty solid and was enough to sustain his survival while having a little bit of money left over. They also allowed him to work remotely, and he was not required to actually go into his office. When they announced this change back in 2020, this excited his introverted being. But it wasn't everything he had hoped it would pan out to be. He had this persistent feeling that he wasn't meant to work this job for the next 5 to 10 years, and his complete lack of human engagement that was generated by his comfortable remote life left a gnawing feeling within the more primitive levels of his brain. That ever-present voice that called out to him from the void of his psyche, that gave him good ideas and solutions for the absence of progression in his life, was being listened to, but never acted upon. And that's because he had reached the point in his life where no more effort or progress was absolutely necessary in order for him to keep on living comfortably. One day, as Jeff was getting his annual physical done, his doctor sat him down to go over what had changed from his previous visit. "Well, Jeff," the doctor said, "it looks like you've gone a decent bit over the normal range for the BMI. You've gained 10 pounds in the last year." The stale smell of the patient room reflected Jeff's mood towards the news. "Oh, wow, really?" Jeff said. "Well, I guess that's just normal with age. I know I haven't done much moving around this past year, so that could be why, but I'll try and work on that." Had the conversation ended here, he most definitely would not have worked on that. "Unfortunately, it seems like you're going to have to," the doctor said. "We took a look at your blood results, and it appears you have hypertension. Your blood pressure is consistently much higher than most people at the age of 27, and so we've made the decision to put you on medication." As the doctor started to explain the details of the meds he would have to take, his field of view expanded and he lost focus of the doctor's face and voice. All he could think about was all those days he spent in uncomfortable comfortness, where he had continuously ignored that inner voice that was pestering him to take action before it was too late. And now it was. When Jeff arrived home, he sat in silence to take in his diagnosis. Those last couple years of immobility had finally caught up to him, and his regret couldn't have been stronger. From that moment on, he vowed to make a change. Starting right now, he would take one small action to improve his body composition and heart health every day until he could eventually get rid of his medication. He started swapping one of the unhealthy foods in his daily meals for something healthier. He took 3 days out of the week to do some cardio and increased the time he ran by 1 minute every week. And because of his newfound active lifestyle, he finally started having enough vigor to try and make some friends. It certainly was not perfect at the start, and he would frequently have days where he would act like his old self. But he knew that this was all part of the process and constantly kept reminding himself of what would happen if he stopped employing forward motion. By the time 1 year had passed, Jeff was a completely new man. He had gotten off of his heart meds, had a solid friend group, and had way more energy to go after his ambitions. And it all started because he had to get worse before he got better. What I've just described here is what is known as the region beta paradox. The term was originally coined by the psychologist Daniel Gilbert, and it essentially means that people can sometimes recover more quickly from more distressing experiences than less distressing ones. When applied to this case, it means that our theoretical man Jeff had to get diagnosed with hypertension, which is a very distressing experience, in order to address and solve these smaller problems in his life. But it took something as distressing as that diagnosis in order for him to finally take action. While Jeff's story isn't one that I can completely connect with, I have been caught in this region beta paradox more times than I'd like to admit. I wasn't willing to improve my relationship with my second girlfriend until after I got dumped. I wasn't willing to stop spending so much time sitting editing and less time sleeping until I had physical health problems that spread to my groin area. Yes, it sounds as bad as it was. And I wasn't willing to really start working on my online business until I moved out of my parents' house and was forced to work harder just to pay rent. One thing I am glad that I started now rather than later, however, is having a good skincare routine using Tiege Hanley. Taking care of your skin is one of those very common region beta phenomena, and that is especially true for men. It is usually only until we start getting wrinkled and old that we start to realize, maybe I should have actually cared enough about this years ago to have done something about it. Tiege Hanley provides you with all the products you need if you want to easily wash or moisturize your face without a ton of different steps. I recommend starting with their level 1 system, which comes with a daily face wash, an exfoliating scrub, an AM moisturizer with SPF 20, and a PM moisturizer. I'm using the face wash almost every day, and the AM moisturizer always has to go on every day before I go outside. Having a face moisturizer with SPF in it is so crucial. Every guy should be doing this before they go outside so they don't age quicker from the sun. And I don't know if you've seen these pictures, but these people who have used sunscreen on parts of their skin but not others, or have been exposed to the sun on more parts of their face than others, really shows how much this can happen over time. They have over 5,000 5-star reviews, and as a Tiege Hanley member, you get tons of benefits, including at least 20% off the retail price, access to exclusive monthly deals, and free US shipping. And because Tiege Hanley is sponsoring today's video, they're offering you guys a great deal. Just click the first link in the description and you'll get 30% off your first box plus a free gift. So don't miss out on this deal. Please start your skincare routine now rather than later so you don't get caught in the region beta. So now that we understand this phenomenon, how do we go about taking advantage of it in order to apply consistent action and achieve our goals? Well, the first step we can do is acknowledge and recognize when we are actually in one of these beta regions. And it's kind of hilarious how it was named beta region even before all of this alpha male, beta male cringe started. But anyways, yes, we need to recognize and acknowledge. When trying to determine whether you are in a beta region or not, ask yourself these questions. Am I comfortable with the thing I am doing? Does that comfort come associated with a nagging unfulfillment that tells me I know I want to do more than this? And is the thing I'm doing bearable enough to not take action, but not unbearable enough so that I actually do? If the answer is yes to 2 or more of these questions, then you are most likely in a beta region. When I think back on my experience, the most optimal way I've handled getting out of this dangerous comfort is to emulate things getting worse by taking on calculated risks that require a more serious commitment. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say you're living at home, your parents are currently paying for your food and shelter, and they don't really stress to you the importance of working. Because of this, you don't really feel that much pressure to find a job and figure your life out, so most days are spent playing video games or doing college work. If you are getting old and this is starting to become a problem, how do you make things worse so that you will finally make things better? What I would do is have a sit-down discussion with your parents and write out a written contract for all of you to follow. Explain to them that you would like to pay for your own groceries from now on and want to start paying a portion of rent in order to live there. This might not be as effective as actually moving out, but I'm going to assume that at this point you don't have the funds with which to do so. Write down how much groceries cost you per month and a reasonable amount of rent to pay, and have them sign it and ask them to please hold you to it. Now, if you don't end up making enough that month to actually pay for those things, obviously you're not going to have them not let you eat and live on the street. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But some sort of negative reinforcement should be applied if the guidelines of the contract are not met, such as being unable to use whatever you play video games on for a certain amount of time, or something else that takes you farther away from getting a job. This way, you are basically forced to work harder in order to pay for the things you want and need, and you'll be at such a level of discomfort that you'll finally want to take action. I'll give you another example in the form of health, because maybe a lot of you guys have already moved out and you're not worried about that sort of scenario. You could be not exactly unhealthy, but not really healthy either, just like Jeff was. What you need to do here is to tie something more painful to the commitment. And what is more painful than losing money? There's actually a website called StickK, which I am not sponsored by, where you can commit to any goal you want to complete and add in a certain amount of money to that commitment. And if you do not complete that goal, which is judged by referees on the site to ensure there isn't cheating, you will lose the amount of money you put up. Having a financial incentive that can be stripped away from you if you don't stick to your goals is, in a way, just like looking at that future worse you without actually getting to that worse you. Because when you do this, you are constantly reminded of how much money you will lose and how much worse off you'll be without it if you do not follow through. Lastly, let's think about a scenario where you don't have any friends, but you want friends, but you don't have enough discomfort and pain to actually do something about it. I would argue that in this situation, it more so comes down to a fear of being rejected rejected, and a fear that everyone you end up meeting will be just like those people who mistreated you in the past. I use this last example to show you that sometimes things that lie within the beta region are actually a result of past traumatic experiences, and no amount of intense discomfort will ever get you to the point where you decide to take action. Because in this particular scenario, the problem lies in the result of the action, not forcing yourself to do the action itself. And so the only way to make sure you don't relive or face that fear is to keep yourself in the comfort of this beta region. Aside from the severe psychological problems that should be addressed by a professional or some form of therapist, what you should instead do in this situation is some introspective work. I adapted this exercise from Tim Ferriss, which was originally called fear setting. In a journal, I want you to ask yourself these questions. What is the worst case scenario that will come from facing my fears? Be specific about this. Define your worst nightmares and rate them from a scale of 1 to 10. Next, ask yourself, what specific actions could I take to reduce the likelihood of this scenario from happening? Then ask yourself, if this situation does happen, what would you need to do to get back on track? And lastly on this page, ask yourself what the benefits might be of a success, partial success, or even an attempt. When you ask yourself these questions, you'll find that not only is the worst case scenario not nearly as bad as you thought it would be, but also even if it does happen, repairing the damages can be done quite simply. And just to really sink this into your skull, on the next page, I want you to write this. Ask yourself, what are the costs of inaction 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years from now? This is another example of priming your brain to think and feel what it would really be like to get to that much of a worse point without really getting there in order for you to finally start taking action. And one last thing that I've used that helps me when I get stuck in these stages of comfortable discomfort, which I still do until this day, is asking myself this vital question. Do I want to be the guy who, at the end of his life, looks back at how he spent the majority of his time and says, man, I really regret not taking more risks and living closer to the edge so I could have actualized my highest potential? The answer is invariably no. And when I constantly keep that in the back of my mind, there's no other choice for me but to make shit happen. So after all this, you should have a system that essentially forces you to take positive action by actually making things slightly worse or simulating things being worse. But it doesn't stop there, because when you find yourself actually taking action on those things that you've been putting off for ages now, you'll be faced with another, more devious problem. Reason number 2, approaching versus avoidance. There's a large part of Jeff's story at the beginning that I purposefully left out. The journey towards getting better after getting worse actually doubled his distress before it doubled his progress. When Jeff started trying to change one thing on his plate from unhealthy to healthy, he was deprived of his usual dopamine kick. This caused larger mood swings throughout the day and made him crankier than he was before he even decided to get better. When he first started doing cardio, he was more sore than he had been in years. On top of that, once he realized how out of shape he was after the first few sessions, it actually made him feel more inadequate than he had felt before he started trying to run. And when he started trying to get into more situations in which he could make more friends, his awareness of his lack of social ability that was hidden from the years of isolation made him lose more confidence than he had in himself before he tried socially engaging with people. There's this very illusory thing that starts to happen when you try to stick and achieve your goals, where when you're trying to improve yourself, it feels like you're worsening yourself rather than bettering yourself. And if you don't understand that it gets worse before it gets better, you'll most likely give up before you reach a certain point. Now let me show you where that point is. On this graph, we will have 2 lines. One represents approaching and trying to improve upon your problems, and the other represents staying comfortable or avoiding them. As the first few weeks or months go by, most of your problems won't produce that significant or quick of a negative change in your life to the point where you really notice and feel it. And so the negative effects will be minimal. But when you start to approach and address the things you want to change or improve upon, the physical and mental distress you will feel when you realize just how inept you are at the thing, or when you fail and see no progress in the thing, will be much greater after the first few weeks or months than it will if you were to have just stayed complacent in that zone of comfortable discomfort. When this happens, most people start to ask themselves, well, what's the point then? All me trying to improve is showing me is that I'm not good enough to. But this couldn't be farther from the truth. Let's take a look at this graph again. If we continue on with these two different ways of action, we will see that after enough time, approaching and trying to improve upon your current state will dramatically improve your physical and mental well-being better than it ever was before, while avoiding this will only make these problems significantly worse over time. And that point right after those two lines cross, when you consistently act upon your comfortable discomfort, is there for you to take. When you constantly remind yourself that getting worse precedes the process of getting better, and it's only temporarily worse because it reminded you of how awful things got after putting them off for so long, you will stay on the path towards a more fulfilling, enriching life, no matter what obstacles you might encounter. But even after revealing to you the secrets behind the difficult journey that all the people you look up to had to face before they eventually became the person you aspire to be, only around 20% of you watching this video will actually go apply what you've learned here. So will you be part of that minority, or will you continue to let your life worsen until it causes irreversible damage? The choice is up to you. Thank you as always to my patrons on Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform separate from YouTube where I put out exclusive content, and you can also talk to me one-on-one over the phone on there. Link in the description to that. And for more self-improvement content, which I have a ton of on this channel, you can check out this playlist right here. Thanks for watching till the end. As always, peace.